Welcome to the Timescales Interviews. I'm Grego, your host, and today I have a very special guest. This right here is none other than the extraordinary British writer and novelist, Eddie Robson. Hi, Eddie. How are you?
Hello. Yeah, no, I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, and thank you very much. When I ran into you online in socials, I thought, wow, I wonder if I could interview him because I'm familiar with your works and have enjoyed them. And when you said yeah, I was like, yes, all right. So thank you very much. And I believe that you are in England, correct?
I am indeed. Yeah, I'm in Lancaster, which is up in the northwest.
In the Northwest. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, this interview is being conducted in California and apparently England. And what is it like there today?
It's actually we've had awful rain for weeks, but it's actually been sunny today.
Okay, cool. It's the reverse here. It's sunny today, and starting tomorrow, we're supposed to have awful rain for the foreseeable future. So,
Yeesh.
um, yeah, we'll be glad when that passes. Now, I want to do something a little different today because I have a mystery to solve,
Uh-huh.
and you're the only one that is going to be able to help me solve that mystery. So I've got a couple of questions for you here, and at the end, I'm going to see if I can solve this mystery and summarize it. Okay. Um, Now, first of all, uh, before we get into Doctor Who, tell us about your most recent novel, which is titled Drunk on All Your Strange New Worlds. That sounds interesting.
Actually, drunk on all your strange new words, which is a important distinction to make because you might end up getting a Google for the Star Trek show. But yeah, it's that's my most recent novel. It was my third novel overall, and my second for Tor.com. And it's a locked room mystery set in the sort of nearish future in Manhattan. And it's about a young woman who's works as a translator for telepathic aliens who have come to Earth and set up diplomatic relations. And her boss is murdered. And the drunk part is that I can't even remember. I don't know where this element came from, but it was. I remember coming up with it quite early on, which was that I think it's because I'd seen people. I'm always very impressed by people who are interpreters for events. Where, in fact, I thought of the idea. I was watching. There was a Q&A for the film Parasite, and Boon Jong Ho, the director, was being interviewed about it, and he had an interpreter who was interpreting in real time, and I'm so impressed by people who can kind of it sort of goes in one ear and like comes out of their mouth, but they're having to continually listen as they translate. Um, and I think that was where the idea came from that like you have these telepathic aliens, so you can't use Google Translate or anything like that. But a side effect is that like the translation process triggers chemicals in the brain, and I was kind of thinking like, these things that wouldn't affect aliens, but it affects us in a weird way. And I thought, what if you feel intoxicated when you're doing it? So it adds an extra level of difficulty to trying to focus and be professional and be accurate, but you're also kind of the longer it goes on, the more drunk you feel. So she's got that to contend with um on top of having to basically solve her boss's murder because she's the main suspect, and if she doesn't find out who did it, then she may be the one who takes the fall.
So it's kind of a sci-fi-ish mystery.
Yeah, it's sci-fi. Yeah, it's that was yeah, it was I was looking casting around for an idea for my next book, and it was and often the process is just you just look at things around you and you kind of think, well, what's the sci-fi take on that? And in this case, it was. I mean, it's an interesting thing. It's something that, like, famously, Doctor Who kind of skates over. They came up with the catch-all thing of, well, the TARDIS translates for you, so no one ever has to worry about,
Mm.
wherever you go in the universe, wherever you go in on Earth or in history, that just is a non-issue. Um, but it's kind of it's something that would inevitably be a huge, especially with like first contact stories. This isn't quite a first contact story, but it's like a 10 years after first contact kind of story. And it's when now I've kind of got into that, I'm now struck like I now kind of I'm trying to write, and trying to write another thing, and it's just coming up again. I'm just like, you have to kind of think, um, just talking to aliens just wouldn't be simple. I mean, it's some of my favorite things have dealt with that as well. Like, oh, what's the film? Arrival,
Mhm.
which was excellent at doing that. So yeah, I don't know. It's in danger of becoming a theme now.
Okay. Now, I apologize for getting the name wrong. I had Drunk on All Your Strange New Worlds. What exactly is the title?
Drunk on all your strange new words. I've got it wrong
Okay,
myself
words.
because we're so used to the Star Trek phrase, which is now obviously a
Right.
series in its own right, and so I have to make sure I don't accidentally say it wrong to people.
Well, yeah, I just did it. Okay, so Drunk on All Your Strange New Words. That's
Word. Yes.
WORDS. Okay,
Yes.
very good. Okay. Now, so that watchers and listeners can get to know you a little bit better. Um, aside from your work in the arts and your writing, um, are there other things that you enjoy in life? I mean, do you have any crazy secret hobbies like skydiving or stamp collecting? Are you a music fan?
I definitely don't have any. I wouldn't say they're crazy secret hobbies. I mean, I am a music fan, and actually, my kind of um, sort of lockdown midlife crisis thing was that I'd always when I was younger I'd always wanted to learn guitar in my teens, and all my friends, pretty much all my I don't say all, but most of my friends played instruments, and they all just kind of taught themselves, and I tried to teach myself, and I was terrible. And I just thought, oh, I just can't do it. And it was actually because my son was having his guitar lessons over Zoom at home, so I could kind of, and I was sort of sitting in the next room, and I could often hear him even through the door. Um, I could hear what he was doing, and I just started thinking, well, maybe, maybe I just needed to take some lessons. It never occurred to
Mhm.
me, just it seems simple now, but I just thought, yeah, it never occurred to me to try taking lessons. Um, and so I started taking lessons with my son's guitar teacher, and so I've been doing that for a little over 2 years.
Oh,
And I'm
wow.
sort of, I don't know, I'm approaching basic competence, I would say, but I do get a lot of joy out of doing it. It is, I recently I tried to get over the fact that I was getting frustrated with a couple of things that I was struggling to do, and my teacher reminded me, it's like, well, why did you do this in the first place? You're not like gonna, you know, with respect, he was sort of like, you're not gonna like turn professional or anything. It's not, you don't have to put the same standards on this as you do with your other creative work. You can just enjoy it. And I was like, oh yeah, I should just be enjoying it. So yeah, um, but yeah, as well as playing it, I am a big music fan. There's always a Beatles reference in all of my books because I'm such a big Beatles fan.
Yep.
In fact, the first one was would had probably a good 100 Beatles references in it, um, from the title onwards. In fact, the one that the book I've recently finished, I'd finished it and there hadn't been an actual place to have a Beatles reference anywhere. So I just thought, well, I won't do it. I'm not going to shoehorn it in. And then on a late pass, there was something that I added in. And it wasn't with the intention of doing this, but I suddenly found a really uh, it was like a really natural place to put something in. It fitted really well. So I just went, okay, right, so I've got one now. But yeah, for instance, like the hologram of John Lennon is in Drunk in All Your Strange New Words, which is in the future if you go to the Strawberry Field bit of Central Park. There's a John. They now have in the future they have a John Lennon hologram who you can talk to.
Okay. Have you been there to
I
the
have been there.
Strawberry
Yes,
Fields
yes,
in
yes.
Central Park? Yeah,
Yeah, no,
that's
it's one of the places I
beautiful.
wanted to go. Yeah, when we visited New York, I wanted to go and see, yeah, that and the Dakota building where he used to live and indeed died.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that building is just right across the street there. And
Mm.
it not only is New York City Central Park absolutely beautiful, that is a gorgeous area. And every time my wife and I have walked through there, there's always somebody out there playing Beatles songs on a guitar
Yeah,
every single
yeah.
time. Yeah. So, um, now I do know your age. You're about the same age as my brother, so I do know that you did not see the Beatles live. I'm
Yes.
wondering, have you seen a Beatles cover band live by any chance?
I actually, do you know what? I don't. Oh no, no, I have. No, I have now that you mention it. In 1995 at the Glastonbury Festival, I saw the Bootleg Beatles, who were, I don't know if they still are, but they were definitely considered the world premiere Beatles covers band at the time. Hence being invited to play the main stage at Glastonbury. Yeah, I do think they're still going, but I'm not sure whether they have the same membership now. I think they might be a kind of rolling thing. I did see I think I saw an advert in Mojo. I think they were advertising for a new John Lennon. I think their John Lennon was retiring. So yeah, they were looking to recruit. But yeah, they'll probably just keep going, I should think.
Do you recall having any the live covers have any emotional impact on you? I know
They were quite
we've
it was
seen them a couple of times, a couple of cover bands, and I was blown away, absolutely blown away.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is remote. Like these are obviously guys who just know the music inside out, and it is quite startling when you kind of they can really I mean often they can do a better recreation of what was on record than the actual
Mhm.
Beatles would have been able to do. It's but that's like
Exactly.
when when I've been taking guitar lessons, we sometimes I was learning I was learning Cinnamon Girl by Neil Young, and my guitar teacher pointed out that you know, we might have to study like exactly how he does this. And the thing is that Neil Young doesn't have to think about how to play like Neil Young because he is Neil Young. So
Exactly.
he probably wouldn't do it exactly like it is on the record. He would probably do something different and just instinctive every time. So yeah, but if you want that kind of reproduction of what you remember, then actually someone who's a fan and is really invested and inside the music actually might well do it certainly more accurately than the real person would.
Yeah, very interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way. And I know that there are some bands where you can listen to or be at their live performances where every song is different. Where
Mm.
where one good example is ZZ Top. Billy Gibbons, when he plays the guitar, uh,
Mm.
every single time that they perform live, it is different. So
Mm.
and I guess he can do that because he is Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an interesting thing that you pointed out there. Now,
Mm.
I highly suspect that you might just be a fan of some quirky British sci-fi drama, Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And I know that people typically have a doctor. And I'm not going to ask you if you have a favorite doctor because it appears as if you've written stories for just about all of them. Um, but it seems as if a person's doctor is the one that was on television when they started watching. So,
Mm.
do you recall when you first saw Doctor Who and were you immediately captivated by it, or was it something that grew on
Yeah, in fact, it's yeah for me it is two different answers to this. So I remember the first time I remember seeing Doctor Who, I managed to pin down that it was not only it was the Five Doctors, but it was I worked out that it must have been from the time of year it must have been the repeat of the Five Doctors, and I only saw a tiny bit of it actually. I don't remember what else I was doing, but it was yeah I just remember the bit where John Pertwee is trying to escape from the obelisk in Bessie. I I quite vividly remember that bit. Um, but it wasn't something that my family watched growing up. My parents are not big sci-fi people. Um, and actually, I remember having another go at watching it at one point. I remember seeing the end of part two of Terror of the Vervoids, and being really scared and like turning the TV off. Um,
you?
and then, but then curiously, I remember going and watching it again the next week. So something must have fascinated me, and I watched it again. And I was scared again and turned it off again. Like I knew enough. I was yeah. I must have known enough to realize that would be there again the next week. That was a cliffhanger, and then it would start in the same place the next week, so I would see the same thing again. But it wasn't actually until I then had a yeah, I watched Delta and the Bannermen randomly, and for some reason, yeah, that hooked me. I don't know whether it was just the age I was by then, just the approach of the show at that time, which was less horror-y. But yeah, I that was when I got hooked in, and then it was nearly gone. So I then experienced it all in a completely random order, depending on what was out on video and what how much money I had, whether I could afford them.
Okay. Okay, gotcha. Now, did you ever actually literally hide behind the sofa, or did you just turn the TV off?
I don't think no. I just turned the TV off. And like, funny enough, the because one thing there's something this came up again on social media this week when someone was saying, oh, but no one, only you had to be incredibly rich to have a big enough living room to have a sofa that you could hide behind because like it would be against the wall. I mean, as your sofa is there against the wall. But funnily enough, my childhood home in York was laid out in such a way that the sofa was away from the wall because it was on the wall where the door was, and if it had been against the wall you would have walked into it when you walked through the door. So actually there was a little gap down behind the sofa, and so I could have hid behind the sofa, but I didn't know. And by the time I was actually regularly watching it, I yeah, we did live somewhere where the sofa was against the wall, so no.
Okay. Yeah, we actually couldn't hide behind the sofa if something terrible came on TV because
No.
it's against the wall and the
Yeah.
TV's over there. So, hey, speaking of things behind you, I see some
Yeah.
things on that shelf back there that I immediately recognize.
Yeah.
And it looks like an impressive media and book collection. And
Yeah.
I see some Doctor Who up there. And what I'm wondering, um, are there works of your own on those shelves?
They're actually, I don't think.
Really?
Nothing of mine is on there. I've got yeah, I think actually all my so I've got uh a shelf upstairs where a different shelf where I keep all my things that I've written. But a lot of them, to be honest, the big finishes, we're very low on shelf space here, and I have a lot of my Doctor Who stuff is in boxes in the cellar, including all my Big Finish CDs and including all the ones that I wrote as well. In fact, I probably need to have a clear out because I've yeah with some of these things I've been given multiple copies like contributors copies and I'm running out of space for them, so I should maybe pass some of them on to people who might appreciate them.
Okay. Now, maybe you should autograph them, and take them to a
Yeah.
convention. Do you do conventions?
I haven't done for a while. No one's asked me actually. I'm happy to do them if people ask me, but I've not been asked to anything for ages. So no.
Well, that's shocking because I have a list of all your works here, and it is long. In fact, I was going to go through and read not the titles of all your stories, but just the ranges. And
Mm,
even reading just the ranges would be really, really long. And
mm,
for people that are watching and listening to this, what I would highly suggest, if you want to see what I'm talking about here, about the amount of stories that Eddie Robson has done, well, you can wiki him, obviously. Um, but go to Big Finish and just type in Eddie Robson and look at the scrolling list of pages and pages, and you may be really surprised. In fact, for Doctor Who fans that are watching and listening to this, Big Finish fans in particular, if you don't immediately recognize the author's name of Eddie Robson, I would almost bet you have read or listened to one of his stories. So, Eddie, one more question on your shelf there. Um,
mhm.
if you had some of your own works on CDs back there behind you, would you
Mm.
ever or do you ever go back and listen to your own stories?
I actually don't, and I feel like I should at some point. I must have I get a terrible cringe of hearing them back, which has nothing to do with like I think with some I'm always wary of saying that because I always think people will think like oh he's just worried that like the director or the actors have ruined them or something, and it's never that. It's that I'm always afraid that I will hear flaws in the writing that I now can't fix because it's been recorded and released and there's nothing I can do about it. Um, and quite often, if I quite often actually, it doesn't even help if people say, oh, I really like that one that you wrote. I often think, I'd rather just like believe you and hold that in my head, the idea like you said it was good rather than listen to it myself and then kind of go, oh no. But I have been thinking because I just don't, especially if I don't listen to it quickly, it will often just kind of recede into the background, and then I'm like, it's old. But I have been thinking, oh, maybe I should sometime just like go through them all and just listen to them all again and just see what, because some of them are quite a long time ago now, and I have been toying with the idea of it feels sort of self-indulgent, but I promise I don't do that sort of thing very often.
Okay.
But yeah, go back and listen to the old ones and see if they stand up.
You know what I would be curious to know, and I want to get back with you after look you've had a chance to do that, to actually listen to some of
Mhm.
your own works. What I'm wondering is with you being the author and with the work as a whole involving the actors,
Mhm.
directors, and producers, and of course the music and sound design. I'm wondering, with you being the author, if with it being your own story that you wrote, if you would actually become engrossed in the fictional world yourself.
It depends. Yeah, and I think sometimes that does happen. If usually if someone has brought something to it that is unexpected, and like that might be sound design, it might be that they've brought something to life in a way that you hadn't thought of, or an actor finds ways to play things that you hadn't thought of. That's when it starts to feel like it's kind of come a bit away from just being what you wrote, and I actually enjoy that because yeah, you do feel more involved because you stop thinking of it quite so much as something that you wrote and start thinking of it as being able to listen to it a bit more as an outsider.
Okay, very interesting. So you actually are capable of being able to write something to entertain yourself in the end, once it's finished. That's
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, the thing is, one of the things that's really enjoyable about doing the big finish things is that, like, with a lot of the stuff I write, you're having to think of like, well, who is the audience? Who am I trying to reach with this? And particularly like if I'm writing things for kids, I'm constantly thinking that it's like, okay, is that something that is going to hit the mark for them? You're always like watching language and things like that, and making sure that things, because I write a lot of stuff that's like preschool, so it's always like, is this an easy concept for toddlers to grasp, and that sort of thing. um and the joyful thing about the Doctor Who things is that I feel like it's completely legitimate to write them for myself because they're aimed at people like me. And I don't have to worry about what people will get or what they'll accept. I mean, you're working with such a huge universe and so many things that have been established that you can bring in things. Like I won't say which one it is because I've written quite a few, and so if I don't say which one it is, it won't be a spoiler. But there is one of my stories. I was plotting it out, and I thought, what would be good at this point is if this character turned out to be a vampire. And in a lot of things, that would be really difficult to pull off to sort of suddenly go like, oh, hang on, there are vampires existing in this world, but we've established that there are vampires in Doctor Who, and so, it's fine to just sort of say, yeah, that's that. The audience is primed for that already. The audiences are primed for so much to happen because if you know Doctor Who, then you know that all the different things that can happen in a Doctor Who story. So it does give you a lot of freedom.
okay. Have you ever written yourself into one of your stories?
Oh no, 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 no.
Okay, so you're not one of the companions secretly?
No, no. Uh, no, because to be honest, and actually that's something that you do come up against is that if you start thinking about it too realistically, like actually I thought one of the most realistic or most relatable things I'd ever seen in Doctor Who is in The Power of the Doctor. Um, when Dan, he's just been on this, you've got the end of this mini adventure that he gets on, and he just kind of goes, bloody hell, I could really have died. Right, that's okay, I'm done. And you're constantly, yeah, with when you're writing the Doctor Who companions, you're constantly saying like, they are constantly putting themselves into terrible danger, and you just kind of have to imagine that that's just normal for them and they're okay with it. Whereas if it was me, I think I would be too scared to get truly involved.
Okay. Okay, I got just a couple questions on writing here, and then I've got one
Hmm?
that's going to help solve the mystery. Um,
Okay.
the your origins. Did you come from a family of people in arts and performing arts, as in other writers, or did you become interested in writing when you were in school? How did it get started?
Yeah, no, we're very much no, we're definitely not an artistic background in terms of my family. There are people who like art and literature. My dad has always been an amateur painter. Um but really, no. It was we're not yeah, I don't come from like a line of of a literary family or anything. And it really was, yeah, it was mostly at school, I would say. I did used to when I was really little, I remember making my own comics and things like that. In fact, I remember I made a Transformers comic. I was an eager reader of Transformers, uh, and I wrote a story where the Autobots win and the war is over. And then actually, literally, as I got to the last page, I kind of thought, oh, this is why they don't do this because I can't do another story now. It's like it's done.
Okay.
It was sort of that was at the age of what, 5 or whatever. That was a valuable lesson in how you plot things out. But
Okay.
yeah, and it was yeah, just doing things, yeah, writing stories at school. I remember actually having a moment when I do remember thinking, oh, I could be a writer. That would be an exciting thing to do.
Really?
And yeah, no, that was probably when I was about 12, recently at secondary school, and I yeah, and literally from that moment, I never really wanted to do anything else.
Wow. Okay.
Mm.
Now, were there mentors around you? Did you have anybody that looked at something you'd written and said, "Hey, Eddie, this is really good. You need to make a career out of this"?
I did have a teacher when we did there was like a school project to do a story in English language, and yeah, and I do remember I had a teacher who said, uh, oh, when Edward is a writer one day, you can all say you knew it, and I doubt any of them do these days. But that definitely planted a seed. But in terms of a peer group, I didn't know anyone who else at school who was interested in writing really, and it wasn't actually until I got to university and then I started to yeah, and I found Doctor Who fandom and I started to get involved with fanfic things, and I got to meet lots of the New Adventures writers through fandom, which was really exciting. And yeah, that was I think Doctor Who definitely made me feel it was possible. And in fact, even before that, one of the things that was really cool was how the Virgin New Adventures, you could just write to them and get their writers' guidelines. And I don't think I got round to sending them. I started writing one, and I don't think I ever got around to sending it before they lost the license and it went to the BBC. But yeah, those guidelines, there's still the stuff in those guidelines that I still remember in terms of writing advice to this day. Um, and yeah, and again, it made it all feel possible and accessible, um, which was really important, especially in the pre-internet days, when you didn't sort of know. And it was, yeah, it was just a great thing that they just said, we'll look at a pitch from anyone.
Wow, that's very interesting. I did not know that, and
Mm.
I think it's kind of a shame it's still not like that today. And because I do know that with Big Finish, and I actually do know why.
Mm.
You need to they have to pitch something to you, I
Mm.
believe is the correct word,
Yeah,
to where they ask. Okay, and I do know why, and I understand it, and it's
yeah,
completely that's completely acceptable. Um, but with Big Finish, you started really early. Um,
mm.
you were bumping shoulders with some talent. Gary Russell, Andy Lane, Nigel Fairs,
Mm.
Nicholas Briggs. I've back. What I'm talking about is the early anthologies, the Big Finish
Mm.
books, and um, I do recall reading one of your stories over 20 years ago,
Mm.
and it was Little Drummer Boy, and
Yeah.
uh, what got my interest. was that Doctor Who was not on television, and I picked up one of those books from Big Finish, and I don't think they had either had not started making audios yet, or if they did, I probably didn't know. And
Mm.
I remember reading that book, um, and reading one of your stories. And in fact, it must have made an impression on me if I still remember it decades later. Um, and I had no idea back then that, wow, a couple of decades from now, I'll be talking to that author. That's crazy. Modern
Mm.
technology for you. But
Yeah.
but what do you recall about those days back then? Did they pitch to authors to write the short stories in the anthologies, or were
I tell you
you
what,
just in a group of people that were doing it?
yeah, I can tell you what the process was because the first short story I had done was actually so their first book was a Bernie Summerfield anthology, and Paul Cornell asked me to write something for that because I'd written short fiction for a Bernie Summerfield fanzine. And so he thought, yes, that's someone who I want to have in. I remember him coming up to me at the Fitzroy Tavern and just said, I'm editing this. You're in. Send me a pitch. Um, and I'm not sure. Actually, I think that that's a story I've not gone back to. I don't think it turned out terribly well, but it was a start. Stephen Moffat is also in that anthology, and that
And
story is very
yes,
much worth looking at because
yeah, I've
that
read it.
is, yeah, yeah. That if anyone's never read that story, that's a really interesting one to look at because it's kind of the seed of what became The Girl in the Fireplace. That idea of two people
Oh,
meeting and over like it's a long time for one person and it's a short time for the other person because of timey-wimey stuff. Yeah. The difference is that he made it into a romance in The Girl in the Fireplace. Um, but then I remember I pitched things to the short trips when they were at the BBC, and I was on the verge of getting something into one of those, and then they stopped doing them. But then when Big Finish said, "Well, if you're not doing them, can we have the license to do them?" And because I think it was Jack Rayner actually, because she had seen the pitch, she would have edited the collection that didn't happen, and then when they moved over to Big Finish, it was like, okay, we like that story. So, but the thing is that actually, I think it was going to be there were different themes. I think the theme for the yeah, no, the theme for the BBC one was going to be uh seasonal themes, so things based on like occasions around the year. So that was the Christmas element. That's how that came in. And then I pitched it for Zodiac, but it didn't make the cut for Zodiac. But Jack said, "Now hang on, we'll get it in somewhere." But by then I'd already put in the bit about him having a twin because so that it would fit Gemini. And then it said, "Okay, the last one is just companions." And we think it's okay for that because you've got an unusual. We're just looking for things with unusual companion teams that we haven't done before in stories. And like you've got Stephen and Sarah Kingdom, so we haven't done one like that before, so that's okay. So it can go in on that on those grounds. Um, but yeah, so it ended up so it's got like three different collection themes that were inserted into it to try and get it to fit in a different collection. But no, from there I pitched for a few different things. For when things came up, they would sort of put out a call and say to the regular writers and say, "Do you want to pitch something for this?" And I would usually pitch two, to in case one of their favorite writers had already done one for a particular doctor and they were oversubscribed for one doctor. So I would typically put them in several times. I put in a pitch for a Hartnell story and a Troughton story. And weirdly, I always thought, oh, I'll get the Hartnell story because no one will pitch Hartnell stories, but someone always did, and then they ended up commissioning the Troughton story instead. Um, but all the while, I was kind of trying to pushed to do an audio, and then yeah, they just in the end they commissioned me to do Memory Lane, which was actually just going to be a
yeah.
replacement script that they were going to keep on the back burner because they'd had scripts fall through before. And had to quickly come up with replacements. So they said, look, this is going to be a back burner script. If it doesn't get used in the next round or two, then we'll just put it. I think it was, yeah, if we don't get it used in this round, then it will become a script for the next round. But that means it won't be out till 2007. This was in early 2005. But then one of those scripts did fall through, and I suddenly got a call saying, like, yep, we're recording it next week.
Oh.
So if you want to come down, come down. And then yeah, it seemed it went well. Paul McGann said he liked it and said yeah, get him back in next time you do another run. And that was great timing because suddenly they got to do that extra run of McGann stories for which was the BBC Seven as it was then. And
Okay.
so yeah, that was I got in the mix for that, which was great because if that story hadn't fallen through and mine been pulled forward, I probably wouldn't have been in the mix for that to pitch for that. But I'd just done one, and so they were like, okay, yeah, we'll get him in, and that was what became Human Resources. Um, and so that was kind of where my whole relationship with Big Finish came from.
Okay, beautiful. What if you got an email from Russell T Davies tomorrow that said he wants you to write for the television series? Would you do it, or did you tell him no?
Oh, good God! Oh, good. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's yeah, no, it's oh, yeah. It's always been yeah. No, of course, I'd love to. I'd love to. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, for someone that wants to do something like you've done, somebody that wants to
Mm,
write a novel, someone that wants to write a Doctor Who novel, somebody that wants to write comics, um, when they go to look at the massive amount of stories that you've written, um, it might kind of give someone an illusion that, oh, this must be pretty easy, and this is what I'm going to do my whole life, and I'm going to start. I've got the best story already written. Well, from what I've learned in talking with people in arts and performing arts,
mm,
that there really isn't something which is called something like a Midas touch, where
mm.
everything that you touch turns to gold instantly. And I've heard this term many times of rejection. It seems
Yeah,
to be common with people in stage who have gone to get a role, and with authors where you may have something that you absolutely love and you know everybody else will, and send it off, and then all of a sudden you hear nothing, or
mm,
you hear no with a reason, which I guess would be better than nothing. Have you
yeah.
experienced rejection like that in your career?
Yes, lots and lots and lots. I mean, this is, I think
Okay.
you're absolutely right that I think people get the idea that, once you're in, and then when you
Mhm.
want to get something made, it gets made. Um, and I think you always kind of think, even when you get in and you find that's not the case, then you think, oh, but there must be a level of success where, you're a big name and your stuff is really successful. And if you want to do something, then it will happen. And I'm not sure it ever does. I think it does get a bit easier, and people are more enthusiastic about speaking to you and trying to work on something with you. Um,
Mhm.
but I'm sure, like, you might think that hey, someone like Rusty Davies, you think, well, his stuff is great. It wins awards. It's always kind of seminal TV of whenever it's made. So surely, if he wants to do something, it gets made. But I'm sure if you ask him, he's got lots of stories. I mean, I think didn't he say that he'd pitched It's a Sin around, it had been rejected by other channels. Um, yeah, I think it happens to everyone, just maybe like less so as you go on. Um, and yeah, and I think it's partly there's a lot of reasons why people don't realize this happens, and I think it's partly because you just don't hear about these things. People don't want to talk about their failures
Mhm.
that much,
Right.
understandably. Um, and people don't ask about your failures because they don't know about them.
Right.
So
Right.
what is it to ask about? But also, it's you want to the nature of the business is that success breeds success, so you want to kind of you want to promote your successes, you don't particularly want to talk about your failures. But the other thing is that a lot of things, especially in the world of TV and also in the world of film, a lot of stuff gets developed quite a fair way down the road without actually happening. And so you get into a habit, I certainly do, of not talking about things until they're a real sure thing. Certainly not
Okay.
until the contract has been signed. And quite often, you get a bit anxious to talk about them. I mean, you see what's happening these days with a lot of stuff that, TV shows that are being shot and completed and they're in the edit. And then, channels are pulling the plug and going, yeah, no, no, we're going to take the tax write off or something. So, I used to joke, oh, you don't want to, you feel like you don't want to talk about it until it's literally the day it comes out, so that, you don't want to jinx it. And, I used to say that jokingly, but now I can increasingly feel like, you wouldn't necessarily be banking on something happening until it's literally, out there.
Okay.
So yeah, you do get people who'll say, you'll announce something and you go, "Hey, I'm doing the thing," and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know you were doing that." And it's like, yes, it's because I didn't tell anyone about it until it was definitely happening.
Okay, so don't count your chickens before they hatch. I
Absolutely,
guess.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, it's
Now,
definitely a thing. Like, but no, I will say, yeah, it's. I think people are often very surprised, particularly in TV, of the sheer amount of ideas, pitches that pretty much every working writer has. Like someone I know who's a novelist and who's got a good track record, very successful. So when he normally gets, he'll have an idea for a book. He could, it will usually come out. So he doesn't have like tons of old projects. And then he was talking to a friend of his who was a TV writer, and he was just like, I can't believe how many things he's got and rejected things he's got in his bottom drawer. This is a guy who's like consistently done a new TV or film thing every 2 or 3 years for like 30 years. And he's got this drawer full of like, yeah, this got rejected. And he just couldn't believe that all these great ideas were just like going nowhere. But it's just that's the nature of TV because so much of it is the right idea at the right time. And you'll pitch something and people will like it, but it's like, oh no, we haven't got a space for it. It's not the right moment for it. No, it needs this, it needs that, and there's something similar happening. The number of times I've pitched the maddest ideas to people, thinking like, oh, surely the way we do it. Oh no, we've actually got something a bit similar to that. We've got something with witches on the moon at the moment. Sorry, and it's sort of like, no, that's not a literal example, but something like that, and you kind of think, really, God, yeah,
all right. So with stories like that, do you keep a portfolio? Well, let's say you have something that you finished and it just didn't get used for whatever reason. You just keep them in a portfolio.
Yeah, and
Okay.
sometimes you look at something in a few years' time, and you'll kind of think, yeah, I'm not feeling this anymore. I'm like, it's not worth picking up again. But sometimes you look at it and you kind of think, oh yeah, actually, there's still something in this, and maybe it needs a bit of a rework, a bit of a polish, bring it up to date or whatever. Or sometimes, it might be a good thing for another medium. Like you'll suddenly get the ear of someone in a different place. Like there's a TV idea that I had. In fact, two TV ideas, and I just thought one day I thought, oh, you could maybe mesh them together and make a good novel out of them, like a real big doorstopper, like sci-fi epic. Which I've kind of written a bit of, and I would like to finish one day. But yeah, sometimes you just kind of think, oh yeah, actually that thing that died a death in that thing, maybe that might be work in another medium. Maybe you could pull out the good idea and try and make a spec film script out of it or something. But yeah, in fact, at the moment, I've just been writing a novel which is not contracted, where the main character he ends up at a sci-fi convention, and I thought um, so I need there to be a show. I don't want it to be a real show because I want to have characters who are the writers and actors on the show. So it's got to be a made up show. And I thought, well, why don't I just use that sci-fi show that I pitched that got rejected a few years ago? So I've got this whole
Okay.
world worked out for this show
Right.
that I can just pull things in from. Yeah.
Okay. All right. We're getting closer to solving the mystery here. And we're running on about an hour here. Are you hanging in there okay? Can I ask
Yeah,
just
I'm
a
okay.
couple
Yeah,
more
yeah.
here? Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. You you've filled in some pieces, definitely.
Good.
Now and thank you for discussing the rejection thing. That's something it's not positive, but I think it's very important for people to know who have dreams and goals of going into
Yeah.
arts and performing arts that it's not going to be easy all the time.
Yeah,
Um,
you're absolutely right. And actually, just I think it's just useful for people to anyone who's got like an interest in this kind of thing. I think it's just kind of useful to kind of to know this is kind of what goes on behind the scenes. So people aren't necessarily talking about, but that is kind of how things go.
okay. Now, as far as the creative process, there I'm starting to detect that there are certain types of people or minds who have managed to retain their imagination from when they were younger. And I'm trying to think of an example of that. Author Andy Lane, recently touched on something about that very briefly uh, with something he said on X. I'm not going to try to quote him because I don't remember exactly what he said, but I knew what he meant. And it seems as if some people can still think like a child, I guess, And I believe that children's imaginations are more vivid and clearer than
Mm,
those of us older people. I think that once you grow up, let's say you have a favorite television program or a favorite comic book or book series
mm,
that you're reading as a child. When you come back to that 20, 30, 40, 50 years later, it may not have as much of an allure as it did
mm.
back then because the
Yeah.
imagination may have been stronger. And I'm wondering, do you know if you have been able to retain your imagination? Is it something that you have to exercise, or is it just something that certain types of people are able to do?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I've particularly exercised it. It is something. It's more of a I don't know. I definitely feel like it works in a different way these days. It feels like it does to me. It feels like a different process. I don't know. It might not for other people, but because there's kind of an imperative to do it. It's like it's not that sort of free forming thing. I mean, a lot of the time, um, I'll get an opening to pitch something, and I've got to think of something, and I've got to kind of form the
Mhm.
idea, and I've got to make it work, and it feels more. I mean, it does. It's a fun job, but it feels more like a job that I've got to do,
Mhm.
rather than just seeing where it takes me. I know some writers are very different about this. I know a novelist who I was, you know, there's always that cliche thing of people writers hating like where do you get your ideas from, but I was talking to her about it and she said that she literally just starts writing. She just sort of free forms. She has no idea what any of her books are going to be about when she starts writing them, which I find really just I find that just a mad idea that you would just do that because I guess just because I've got used to working in a different way. Part of it is that because I a lot of my experience came from Big Finish where every idea has got to be submitted to the Doc 2 production office. So you get quite used to thinking everything out before you start. And with my novels, I do freeform it a bit more. But I always kind of know, like, what the core idea is, who the characters are, and then it's a case of kind of fleshing it out. So I would always need to know. I would have the terrible fear that if I just started writing, that I'd get 20,000 words in and just go, I don't know what I'm saying. I don't know what the point
Right.
of this is. I have to know there's going to be a point to it. Whereas like other people just trust that they'll find the point as they go.
Okay. Now, let's say that you are pitched some you're approached and told we need a 12th Doctor story with this companion,
Mm,
for example, and it needs to be set on this distant moon or
yeah,
something like that. And um, it's time to start, time to get down to business, time to start writing.
yeah.
Um, I'm wondering what your writing process is like, such as do you just stick a blank piece of paper in the typewriter and then type the title by Eddie Robson and start with the first
Mm.
sentence? Or is it more complex than that? And in addition to that, do you get writer's block where you just have to stop for a while or something?
Essentially, so yeah, as I say, so one thing is that like I would usually have I don't usually just start with a blank page. I would usually because I would usually have a thing at least a document saying um that I'd sent off to say like this is the plot, beginning, middle, and end. Try and get it.
Okay.
They always try and get it all into one page. So even my last one, Intelligence for War, where it was like a seven-parter, it was like no one page, get it all into one page. What I actually
Wow.
usually do with certainly with the Doctor Who, what I would usually do is I would take that document that I sent off, I'd open that back up, um, and I would if it wouldn't be broken into episodes. So yeah, first thing, break it into episodes, and then I would start writing a scene breakdown over the top of that. So I've got like just using that so that I remember which bit I'm on. I just kind of go, okay, that bit of like this, there'll be a paragraph that will describe a whole bunch of stuff happening, and I'll go, okay, that's 5 scenes, and they are da, 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 da. Um, because with things like that, it just I find it saves a lot of time. I'll often make changes once I've done that, but it I find it a very helpful exercise to have done that. Yeah, usually I'll end up saying like, oh, actually, this bit actually needs to happen over 2 scenes, or this doesn't flow very well, so it needs another scene in the middle. Um, but yeah, it's to make sure that's how I kind of make sure that it all balances out. I've got a reasonably good sense of once I've written all that out of like, okay, is that enough story for the space I need
Mhm.
to fill? Um, and sometimes, yeah, that will often reveal like if something that I kind of thought, oh yeah, that's an episode's worth of stuff, and then I'll type it out and I'll be like, oh, actually, it's 8 scenes. That feels like that's not going to be enough. So I'll go back and think, okay, do I need to flesh something out? Do I need to take a bit from another episode? So, yeah, it's quite yeah, it's quite uh stages. Yeah, so the process sort of goes in stages, sort of like going up and up, and then it just makes writing much easier when I sit down. And it's often why it's why I very rarely feel like I don't ever feel like I really have writer's block because I have days when it doesn't feel very inspired and not very good, and I know I'll have to go back and rewrite it later. But I I always think writer's block happens when you just don't know what to write next.
Okay,
And I
that makes
because
sense.
I'm kind of quite a fairly prep based writer, I always know what I have to write next. So I've certainly
Okay.
never had writer's block on a Doctor Who script. I've had ones where like with novels because I tend to freeform a bit more on novels. Um, Sometimes it goes a bit like that, but I've been writing one recently where I've done a big chunk of it. I've done like 20,000 words, which is probably about a quarter of the book. And I think I've got a lot of the ideas that I need and the characters that I need, but I've done that without an outline. And I think right, I think actually now I've felt my way into the world and the story and the characters. Now I think I will do an outline and go back and rewrite that with the outline in mind. The things I need to set up, things I need to cut. Um, yeah, I just feel more comfortable writing with with an outline. I mean, the last book I did, fun enough, I thought I knew the outline really well, and I just started writing, and then I went to check something in the outline. I was like, oh, I forgot to do that, and that's good and makes sense. And actually, I need that for later, and I should have just looked at my outlines because now I'm going to have to go back and put it in. But yeah, yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah, you thank yourself for these things.
Okay. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you for describing that because somebody is going to watch and listen to this that wants to be like Eddie Robson. And that right there is exceptional education.
Mm.
And thank you for that. So,
Yeah, of course.
okay, we're getting close to the end here. You've almost
Yep.
filled in all the pieces of the puzzle. I think I'm almost ready to solve the mystery. But let me touch on just one big finish Doctor Who story here. And that's going to be Time in Office. Now,
Yeah.
when I read that or when I listened to that, I like a lot of people, I believe, started listening to Big Finish a lot during lockdown in particular.
Mm.
And there was a time where I didn't really pay much attention to who the authors were. I think I was kind of judging the books by their covers, so to speak, and picking out stories that I was interested in because of the
Yeah.
covers and then who the doctor was and the title, for example. Like when I picked Little Drummer Boy because the title was real interesting to me. Now, when Time in Office came out, that's one right there where I listened to it the first day straight through and first night and with my headphones. And I loved that so much that I wanted to go back because I felt like it was in the story right there.
Mm.
And I listened to it again the next day and and then again the next day. That story right there, Time in Office, I clearly remember listening to at least 3 times, and it may have been more, but I do know for
Mhm.
sure that it was 3 times. And that was another instance where I had to look at the credits, the production credits, and go, okay, who wrote this thing? And then of course I saw Eddie Robson. And what I'm wondering is how somebody can, how a human mind can create such a realistic environment. Because to me, I wanted to see that on TV in a way,
Mm.
but the audio format allows the imagination to fill in all of the pieces. So every
Mm.
single person on earth that listens to that is going to see something different in their
Yeah.
mind because of it being audio only. And I'm wondering how did you do that? I mean, how in the world does anybody do a story like that? Do you happen to have a box of videotapes on VHS of every single Peter Davison episode, and you've watched all of them hundreds of times? Or fill me in. How in the world can
Yeah.
somebody create something that intensely realistic, which to me was better than any of the TV episodes ever were?
Yeah, I mean, actually, I have to give some credit here to the idea for the Doctor was called back to Gallifrey to be president was actually Alan Barnes's idea, and
Okay.
he gave me it initially as it was going to be a subscriber special, and then I didn't hear anything back for quite a long time after I'd sent off the pitch for that, and then they came back and said we decided to do something else as a subscriber special, but we still like this idea. And in fact, I got to do two things ever because they said, okay, we decided we're going to do the five companions for the subscriber special, so you can write that, but we still want to do the Gallifrey story, but that's going to be a four-parter now. And I can't remember. I think it might have been Alan's idea to do the four stories thing, do four one-episode stories that were kind of linked rather than a four-parter. Um, I mean, I think, and that was what made me think of trying to approach it a bit like a comedy, a bit like a political comedy. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, I mean, certainly the mood of that era, I watched that a lot. It's actually funny enough. You asked about earlier about like who my doctor was. Actually, the one that I watched the most when I got the stories was Peter Davison. I love the Peter Davison stories. I've
Okay.
seen the Five Doctors a lot. The Five Doctors were like the second when we didn't get a VHS player until I was oh 12, I think, nearly 12 in 1990.
Mhm.
And one of the first, second Doctor Who story I bought was the Five Doctors. So I watched it as it is when you've only got a few. First was the Mind Robber, then the Five Doctors. So I watched that over and over and over. So I do have a strong impression of that world of Gallifrey. But I was trying to kind of, I guess, maybe I think what maybe helps give it a bit of richness is that I was kind of trying to reconcile the different Gallifreys that we'd seen. So the kind of the omnipotent Gallifrey of the War Games and the Three Doctors, and the kind of squabbling political Gallifrey of the Deadly Assassin and the Invasion of Time. And then I don't know, the more that I guess how would you describe the yeah, the more there's something quite sort of self-absorbed about the Gallifrey of Arc of Infinity and the Five Doctors are sort of always talking about their own myths and they feel particularly yeah, they feel particularly kind of isolationist. And I was kind of trying to reconcile all those things at once and all that we know. And I think that probably that actually maybe is what gave it another dimension because you know real people and places aren't just one thing, and so in trying to kind of reconcile all these things, it's sort of everything at once. Oh, and you know, and also got I forgot to mention the Gallifrey that you see in the Doctor Who magazine strip at the time as well. That was a
Mhm.
huge influence. I mean, the I've always loved that thing in the story for is it Four Dimensional Vistas, the one where they've got the battle TARDIS, the military TARDIS,
Mhm.
the
Right.
enormous military TARDIS, and that was I was always keen to get that in there somewhere. And so yeah, kind of trying to put all those things in together, um, and then putting the Doctor into that world. Um, and putting him into sort of an unfamiliar situation where you know he doesn't normally have to deal with this. That I want to really emphasize, you know, the all the duty, all the bureaucracy he's got to deal with, all the things that the Doctor usually hates doing, um, and you know, yeah, what he would want to try and do with it. Um, so yeah, that was kind of where I was coming to it from.
Okay, awesome. I think I just solved the mystery, and that was the mystery question right there. So I think I've got it. But in closing here, I have just a couple of other things to touch on
Yeah, yeah.
because of the massive breadth of your career. Comics. How could we not mention comics? Because I too have loved your comic stories. and the comics is a great reason that I subscribe to Doctor Who magazine. I love those things, and I'm wondering, did, did you start reading comics as a kid, and then becoming a Doctor Who author, and obviously being very extremely familiar with the
Mm.
world building and the character development needed for good enjoyable, engrossing Doctor Who stories. Um, did you get invited? Did someone say, "Hey, we want you to write some comics" when you were already writing short stories, or did you seek out to write comics in addition to writing short stories and novels?
I think with the Doctor, I think I sorted that out because there's two outlets. Well, there's two outlets that I've written Doctor Who comics for. There was Doctor Who Adventures,
Right.
and those were that was a good kind of discipline because they were the 4-page stories,
Mhm.
um, and you could kind of go quite. It was sort of a ravenous beast. They always needed more stories, so I was quite keen to do those. But the other one was actually my friend Andy Diggle. He was doing an arc for IDW of Doctor Who comics, and we talked about it. And funny enough, he outlined what he wanted to do with it, and he wanted to sort of bounce ideas off me. And I said when he said what he wanted to do for the final arc, I said, "Oh, I actually pitched a novel with a really similar uh, premise to BBC Books in about 2002 or something." But I just said, "Oh, it's good. It's cool that it's happening. It's a good idea. Go for it." And then he came back to me later, and he was like, "I'm a bit overloaded with work, and I feel like I could do with a co-writer on this. And because you already kind of you said you had a really similar idea. I think this makes sense." So I did get to do my story that way, which was really cool. Um, but yeah, that was so. No, it's an interesting one. Doctor Who comics. It sort of works. It's always works really well as a comic. I think because yeah, just because because of the way you can. It's a medium where you can really like let fly with the visual imagination, which has always been difficult in Doctor Who, I guess.
Okay. Now, we've only got two other questions here that I would love to ask you, and it's going to be about Iris Wildtime and Bernice Summerfield, because how could we not
Okay.
cover
Yeah.
those, even if just briefly? But I'm wondering, do you recall the very first piece of physical work of yours that you saw in your hand? Was it one of your books that arrived in the mail? Was it one of your comics? I think I know which one it would have been.
Yes,
But
it would have
do you
been the.
remember?
I think so. I think so. You know what? I think. Yeah, funny enough, it was because it was the Bernie Summerfield collection, the Deadman Diaries, that
Okay,
I contributed to,
okay.
and I think we actually got given our contributors' copies at the Panopticon convention in Manchester. I think they just got delivery of them, and they'd got a bunch of us to come up to do a little panel for the event. And yeah, I think that was where we got our copies. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that was the first time I saw my own work in print.
Okay. Now that's been a couple of decades ago. Do you happen to recall how it felt? Did you feel accomplished? Did you immediately go and read your own story, or how did it feel?
Yeah, I kind of actually read. I definitely, you definitely go and kind of look to kind of, just to kind of see it's there as soon as you get it.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it was tremendously exciting. Yeah, definitely. And it was quite nice for it to be shared because a bunch of us were there, and I know at least one other, right, Mark Mikulowski, I remember was there, and it was his first published work as well. So
Okay.
so it was like, yeah, it was nice to kind of be there, like, and yeah, that's quite an unusual thing because, as you say, usually it's a case of like, you get it in the post, or
Mhm.
if they don't get the copies to you, maybe you see it in a shop. But to actually have it happen at an event with other people who were getting their first ever published work at the same time, yeah, that was pretty cool.
In person. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah. Normally, from what I will hear is that someone will get it in the mail, their
Yeah.
first work. I remember Will Hadcroft, who wrote The Resurrection Plant for BBC Audio
Uh-huh.
Originals. He described to me what it felt like to. In fact, he opened it and showed me when he opened his first published work, and I can't imagine the feeling of what it would be like to see your first
Mm-hmm.
published work. Um, So, Bernice Summerfield, you produced that. What was it like to work as a producer as opposed to a writer?
It was a great insight because it was even working on something where we were doing it wasn't, it was quite small, 4 plays a year. We had casts of technically four and a half. The budget stretched to four, so like you would have two of the plays would have five cast members and two of the plays would have four. Um, and we were the Simon Guerrier, my predecessor, had set it up so you really kind of like get left with quite a minimal format, so we could kind of go anywhere and do anything. And actually, the amount of coordination work in and it was also it was a small team as well. It was me, directors, sound designer, working with the studio and the actors, and that was basically it. And yeah, just the amount of coordination, the amount of things that you had to keep track of and make sure they didn't go wrong, just on a tiny team of people, um, gave me a real insight into how hard it must be if you're working in TV and it's hundreds of people, or in film where it might be thousands of people.
Hmm.
It was, yeah. I mean, just thinking of that from my experience of just kind of, I mean, obviously, like I was doing it on my own, I was sort of running it from literally running it from my office at home. But yeah, it's not that I ever thought it was easy to do those things, but it certainly gave me an element of an extra element of respect, that like yeah, to be able to kind of be over all aspects of something, was it was yeah, it's a bit mind blowing.
Okay, and you even worked on Iris Wildtime. I have a couple
Yes.
of your Iris Wildtime stories. Have you met Katie Manning? And isn't Katie Manning actually Iris Wildtime?
Yes, yeah, yeah. In fact, I sorted out. We had a big finish party. When was the big finish party? Yes, I bet it was. Ooh, I think it was probably 2019. Yes, it was 20 years of Big Finish. So, but and there was yeah, I went along to this event that invited me down. I thought, oh yeah, I'll go. That sounds like fun. I was kind of expecting it to be, about 2 dozen of the usual suspects. Um, and it was madness, and so many people were there. So many people. It was, yeah, it was so. It was quite a remarkable night. I mean, yeah, like David Warner was there, for instance, and all sorts of people. But yeah, Katie was there, and I patiently, I actually had to head off, but I waited, I waited about 20 minutes. Well, I don't know, it felt like that. It was probably wasn't that much, but I just waited for Katie to finish a conversation she was having with somebody else, and just that's sort of like sort of hovering a bit here, but I'm determined to actually meet Katie and just and say hello to her, because actually we had met. I had got her to sign my copy of the Demons VHS in 2000 when she was that was when she was living in Australia, and she was on a visit to the UK. And I had nearly everyone who was in the Demons had signed this thing, including John Pertwee. And he'd passed away by then, of course, but then she signed it next to where he'd signed it. Um, but no, I just really wanted to say hello and just say. But yeah, no, she is. She just it's because Paul Mars knows Katie, and they hang out, and he leaned into he very much leaned into what Katie is really like, for the character, and she is yeah, I she is like, just following her on Twitter. She is yeah, she just said any tweet from Katie just makes your day better.
That is a really good way of putting it. She is energetic and absolutely lovely,
Yeah.
and Paul is also an author that I very much admire. I'd love to talk to
Yeah.
that guy someday. So you know what? I think I finished the mystery. Okay. Um, the way that you can create atmospheres like you do, and build stories that, at least to me, may just be superior to any of the TV stories of an era. I think that it's because, number one, and I'm going to use a British term here, you're brilliant. Okay, and you are very intelligent and you're talented. And number two, you're a Doctor Who fan. Okay, and number three, you love what you do. And did I get any of those three right?
Well, modesty we just to agree about being better. No, I do. You know, I do. I work on these things and I try and yeah, I try and bring something to them. But yeah, certainly on the counts of yeah, I do love what I do, and yes, I am a Doctor Who fan.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, hey, let's wrap it up because I have taken more of your time than I asked you for, and thank you. There was one question I missed about the writing process, and that is editing. Do you ever happen to remember if you had something that you really wanted into a story and the editing process was going to take it out? You ever had that happen?
Oh, I'm sure I have, but I'm usually quite sanguine about these things, and I just you know, I try not to just hang on to them. You know, just you know, if it just let it go, or if it was good enough to do, then you'll find a place for it somewhere else. And
Okay.
if you forget it after you've done it, then it wasn't worth doing. I did actually. I think the one thing the one thing that comes to mind that I wanted to do was when I wrote The Condemned, which was going to be the first in a new series of Sixth Doctor and Charlie adventures, I attempted to have a stray cat wander into the TARDIS, and that the Doctor would keep it, and it would be the TARDIS cat. And
Nice.
we wrote that out. I was like, I was a little bit disappointed by that,
Darn.
but yeah.
All right.
It
So,
would,
what
no,
do you work?
you wouldn't have to have a cat hanging around, you know, but just for the sound effect. But, you
I
know.
would love
Anyway.
there for to be a TARDIS cat, but then of course the TARDIS cat wouldn't like the TARDIS swimming pool room. So,
Yeah.
um, what are you working on now, or is there anything that you can say about what you're doing?
Yeah, a little bit frustratingly, I'm working on a bunch of stuff, and it's not been announced, or it's the contract
Okay.
is still in the works, or something. So it's a bit annoying that I can't that there's things I can't say. There's a couple of things that I can say. So I could definitely say I've got a short story coming out in Uncanny Magazine soon. I don't know when. They've not said when it's going to happen, but that's all been announced. So they're fine with that. Um, and I don't think I should be able to say what it is, but I've got a short thing coming out, which is my first solo American comics work. Without I've co-written with Andy Diggle on a few things where his workload uh got on top of him, and he was like, I need, you know, I need some help to get this done.
Okay.
Yeah, there was so, but I just done something. So yeah, that's been accepted, and the contract is signed. In fact, it's written. It's all done. So that will be coming out in the not too distant future, hopefully. But yeah, that's going to be my first American comics thing. But yeah,
Okay.
no, there's other stuff happening, but I don't really. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't talk about it at the moment, which
Yeah.
is
Okay.
frustrating.
Gotcha. Okay. So with the American comics thing, you can't tell me
Yeah.
exactly when it's coming out, what the title is, and what the plot is.
No, it's no, it's I
Darn.
should yeah, no, no, it's like yeah, it's in an anthology series, and it's just going to be
Okay.
a short strip, one of those. Oh, another thing, I have the soon. Oh, there's an anthology called Cyber Salon, where they get people to they get writers to talk to experts in a certain field, and then you write near future sci-fi things. And actually, this is very minimally sci-fi. This is like almost technology that exists, but not quite. In fact, it's technology that you could have, but we haven't done it yet. Um, about digital money. So I've got a short story in that collection, and that was just really fascinating because yeah, you get to talk to people who yeah, just know stuff that you don't, and it's just it's a cool thing to be involved in. So that I think is out in April, I think.
Okay. Okay. And you're gonna let everybody know online when that's out. Okay. And where do
Yeah.
you like to be found online? I think I found you on Twitter X.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm still there. I'm still there. I'm also on Blue Sky these
Okay.
days as well, and sort of hedging my bets between the two. Keep hoping that Twitter gets a bit better. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We'll
Those are the
keep our
main
fingers
places.
crossed.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, cool. And for people watching or listening, go to the link below on this YouTube interview and go follow Eddie on X and check out his works.
yeah. Well, there's my
Now,
yeah. I was going to say there's also my I'm also on Substack. I have a quite a regularly updated Substack whenever I have something new to announce.
Okay.
Like I did some stuff like I did a collection of columns that I did in Doctor Who figurine collection, which were just sort of answering unanswered questions from Doctor Who from various stories, which I did. I collected them all together and put them out as an ebook after the magazine folded. But I also have a weekly Substack where I do short fiction, where I try and keep them all under 1,000 words. I'm trying to make them shorter. It's sort of because I don't want to take up. I want them to be something that you can read quite quickly. But yeah, I do one of those every week. That's called the Brittle Stars.
The Brittle Stars on Substack. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to put a link to that down below here. Now, to the watchers and listeners that have tuned in and enjoyed this, learned something from it, become educated or inspired by it, please thank Eddie for his time, because he didn't have to do this and sit down and let me ask him all of these questions. Yet he was very kind and generous to do so. And Eddie, I really appreciate it. I consider it a great honor to have been able to meet and talk to someone as talented as yourself. They say never meet your heroes, but I think it's okay. And I really do appreciate it. I loved talking to you, and thank you. And people, go check out the works of Eddie Robson, because I think there's a very good possibility that you may find something that you will absolutely love, because I know I have. So Eddie, for anybody that wanted to emulate you, somebody that wanted to be like you, write and create comics and uh, uh, novels, Doctor Who stories, Iris Wildtime stories, Bernice Summerfield stories, any novels, do you have any best advice that you could give someone?
Yeah, I always think the advice I would usually give is it sort of goes back to what I was saying about failure is always try and have as many ideas as you can. Well, have plenty of different ideas. Don't I sometimes meet writers who like really work at like one or two ideas, and they're always kind of that's the thing they really want to do. And it's good to have that kind of passion for an idea, but um the amount of times that you go in, you get an opportunity to maybe to pitch something to someone, and they'll be like, well, not that, but what else do you have? And that goes for original things, and it goes for stuff when you're writing for other properties like Doctor Who, is oh, we can't do that because of that, or like we maybe they just don't like it, but quite often it will just be, oh, it's similar to something else or whatever. um, and they'll be, well, what else have you got? So it's always, be flexible about that. Always kind of have always good to have more ideas in your back pocket.
Okay, very good, Eddie. Thank you so much. And for watchers and listeners, in addition to Substack, Eddie's Twitter X link down in the description. We are also going to put a link to his novel, Drunk on All Your Strange New Words. And you will be able to find that online with the synopsis and order there. And we're also going to put a link to his Blue Sky, and we're also going to put a link to the Big Finish search page, which shows all of his stories. So there is a large amount of entertainment to be found by none other than this wonderful author, Eddie Robson. Eddie, thank you so much. Was there anything that I didn't ask that I should have?
I don't think so. No, no, no. I think we've covered it.
Yeah, I think we have covered it. Okay. Thank you so much. It was an absolute honor to be able to meet you. And thank you for letting me do an interview with you,
That's okay.
Eddie.
No, thank
Thank
you
you
for
so
having me
much.
on.
Okay. Take
Cool.
care.